I started building this power converter over a year ago for my research. It's a brand new topology, never built before, so it will either explode during tests or actually work, and there is only one way to find out what's going to happen. In any case, it should be quite fun. So in simple words, I'm trying to build a battery charger that can simultaneously charge or discharge 4 batteries, all connected to a DC grid. In a way, it's kind of like a phone charger, but bigger, with more ports and a very different structure. The topology itself is a combination of 3 typical boost converters, the same ones you can buy on AliExpress for a couple of bucks, and multiple isolated full bridges, like full bridge rectifiers, but with transistors. So using this structure, power can be delivered from any port to any other port, bidirectionally, which means power from one battery can be used to charge any other. Quite convenient, huh? In the last few videos, I've already shown how I assembled the primary side inductors, the control board of the converter, capacitor discharge boards and some of the transistor drivers. But there's a lot more. So I started by ordering new improved PCBs, this time with a proper layout and all the mistakes fixed. These boards are supposed to receive PWM signals from the microcontroller via a differential pair and turn the transistors on and off. This time I also decided to order a new solder paste, which turned out to be a huge mistake. First of all, it has a low storage temperature, so it has to be stored in the fridge, meaning my bananas finally got some company. But that wasn't the biggest problem. The most annoying part was actually melting it. Even though I have a nice hot plate and could heat the boards properly, the paste just wouldn't melt for some reason. My best guess is that while I was applying the paste on all 6 boards, the flux inside the paste evaporated somehow. Probably. But in any case, there is no problem that's unsolvable, right? So I just manually added more flux on the boards and that somehow helped. Next, the half bridge module was soldered to the control board, which is actually 2 transistors in one package with a common heatsink. And the driver module was inserted into pin sockets. But it's not finished yet. As you know, any transistor requires cooling. Sometimes in low power applications, being soldered to a PCB which acts as a heatsink is enough. But in my case, I need something chunkier. A piece of aluminum bought at a local store should work just fine. So I decided to drill several holes and screw the transistor to it. The task didn't seem too complex. I just hope ±1 mm tolerance is fine, considering curvature of my arms. So first, the aluminum piece must be punched. Using anything nearby is fine, but it's better to use a center punch. In any case, it's extremely satisfying to use. I guess that's why men don't do therapy that much. Men have their tools. What can be better than drilling some holes, cutting some wood or hammering a nail in your garage? Maybe doing all that while holding a cold beer. Yeah, true, that might be a bit better. Someone in the comments told me that using tabs isn't that hard, so I guess it was time to buy myself a set. Because there was no other good option to screw the transistor in anyway. Eventually, when the modules were ready, I went to the lab to test them. I started with one module, connecting it to the control board and sending some control pulses. Basically, with one such module, I just have a simple boost converter. A big, chunky boost converter. By measuring the voltage at one of the transistor modules, we can see how it's switching. And at first glance it looks fine, but if we zoom in, we see the bigger picture and a huge problem. Oscillations with an amplitude about 2.5 times higher than the output voltage, which is not good, definitely not good. The peak was around 250 volts, while the output was only 100 volts. But now imagine what happens if I apply full voltage. With 700 volts at the output, skdish, the transistor module is burned because it's rated for only 1.2 kilovolts. And the source of these oscillations is the parasitic inductance of the wires connecting the capacitor to the module. Ideally, the wires should be as short as possible and as close to each other as possible, so there is no loop. As you might know, the bigger the loop, the higher the inductance is. So intuitively, everything needs to be shorter and closer together. The only way I know how to do that is by using busbars, which I ordered from the sponsor of today's video, PCBWay. I designed them in SolidWorks, uploaded the files to PCBWay's metal fabrication service, and in about a week these beautiful busbars made from high conductivity copper were at my home. Quite convenient. Also, all other PCBs you see in the video were manufactured by PCBWay, which made building this converter possible. So if your project, like mine, requires PCBs, CNC machined or 3D printed parts, feel free to use PCBWay's services. The reference link is in the description. So a busbar is basically a metal plate connected to terminals. In my case, I use one for plus and one for ground of the capacitor. Obviously, there has to be insulation between them, otherwise they'd be shorted and nothing would work. For insulation, I used 250 micrometer PTFE sheet, cut manually, which should theoretically withstand up to 10 kilovolts, more than enough for this application. Then I just screwed the whole thing to the board. Of course, such a big fella as this capacitor can't just hang there without any support, so I made a support bar from an aluminum profile by cutting it manually and drilling some holes. Remind me to clamp the part in a vise next time. Oh wait, I don't have a vise. That's why I was using my hands, right. Anyway, the full bridge module looks like this. It's not ideal, could have been better, as always, but it should do the job. Theoretically, the parasitic inductance should now be much lower than with two wires, and the result was actually quite good. The spike is much smaller and the transistors are safe now. Very nice. In a similar way, I assembled all the other modules, and it was time to see how all that crap looks together. Ideally, of course, I should have modeled the entire device first, but there was no time for that, so I had to do it on the go. On the right side I placed the interleaved boost part, then all the magnetics so they wouldn't interfere with the drivers, and 3 full bridge modules, which are isolated with transformers. With transformers? What transformers? Ah, transformers, the one I made from several toroidal cores stacked together. According to my calculations, I needed 3 cores and about 30 turns on the primary, wound in a single layer. But as always, nothing went according to plan and I couldn't fit them properly. God damn it. So I had to add another core to get the inductance I needed, otherwise the core saturates and my day is ruined. In total I made 3 transformers, one for each isolated port. So at each port there is also a relay board to connect or disconnect the battery, and a capacitor discharge circuit to discharge big fellas quickly so they don't zap me when I touch them. Everything is controlled by the main control board, which is screwed to the plate, and the plate is screwed to the main frame. After drilling 10 holes, then another 10, then another, and screwing everything down, the most fun part started. Connecting everything. Assembling cables and crimping wires without a proper Molex crimping tool, because it's expensive. So I ended up using pliers. Of course it worked, but the time it took, oh man. and the quality wasn't that great. I don't recommend this method. Always use a proper tool if you can. But anyway, it was done and it worked. I managed to connect everything in just a couple of days. And honestly, it looks quite scary. I've seen transistors explode in much lower power converters, with pieces stuck in the ceiling. I can't imagine what I will see if this thing explodes. Probably God. So I started testing it with low power and low voltage, around 700 watts and 100 volts at the input. And it kind of worked. Except this part. The inductor current shouldn't look like that. Oh wait, I just needed to change the measurement range on the probe. Still, the currents weren't symmetrical. All three should be the same but phase shifted. It turned out that current in nearby wires was affecting one of the probes. Quite funny, huh? Then one of the filter inductors exploded, which I had designed with, let's say, not a lot of effort. Basically what happened is the lead's wire strands were cut by a sharp core edge. The insulation was damaged and 700 volts cracked the core and burned a hole through a piece of paper. It turns out that paper isn't a great insulator. So I guess I will need to redesign those, but for now I just cut them out of the circuit. It should still work just fine. After that, I started pumping more power into it, using bidirectional power supplies, with a peak power of 10 kilowatts. I increased voltage and power, and at 5 kilowatts and 300 volts at the input, the output was roughly 700 volts. And everything still worked just fine, except one tiny problem. The passive load I was using started smoking. I think it was dust inside that had been accumulating for years. The smell was so bad it was impossible to work in the lab, so I went for a break to eat a sandwich. Then I noticed another small layout mistake that prevented the relays from switching. So again, cutting traces, soldering wires, taping everything, and it worked. Can you hear that clicking? That's the relays finally working. Nice! As always, there is no problem that can't be fixed with some tape. Once I was sure the primary side worked, it was finally time for the isolated ports. It can be a little bit overwhelming to understand how they work without experience, but the operating principle is similar to a dual active bridge converter. I will leave some links in the description. Basically, power transfer to the output depends on the phase shift between primary and secondary voltages applied across the inductor. If the phase shift is 0, no power flows, because voltages kinda cancel each other out. When the phase shift is positive, power goes to the output. When the phase shift is negative, power flows in reverse. The same principle applies to all three outputs. So when I started sending more power to one port, an inductor began singing, probably to scare me, but I wasn't scared at all, so I increased power to 8 kilowatts. Only an explosion can scare me now. No explosion. Good sign. So I connected power supplies to all isolated ports to see how the converter behaves when everything is loaded simultaneously. And I was actually very happy to see that everything worked exactly as theory predicted. All ports operate independently, I can change power on any port without affecting any other, I can disconnect one or send power from one port to another. And the crazy part is, all this work was done just to make some simple measurements, to get the switching waveforms, currents and finally efficiency curves, which you can see now. Actually, I don't even know if this converter will ever be used in industry, but from the other side it was extremely interesting to build and I guess I learned a lot along the way. I hope you also learned something new. So if you liked this video, check out other ones, they are also pretty nice. Love you, bye.